Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I am your guide, Derek Hayes. Hey there everyone, great to have you back with us here tonight. It's a dark and snowy evening here at the cabin, and I hope for something similar for you. Because this is the perfect sort of evening to listen to some scary stories. Now tonight's episode is going to be a bit different than most. You'll probably remember a few weeks ago when I said we might be taking a few Tuesday shows off every once in a while. Well, this is one of those whiles. But instead of going completely dark tonight, I've brought back a couple Beyond episodes to share with you. So if you're a supporter of ours on Apple subscriptions or Patreon, this episode will sound familiar. And if you're not, well, this will be brand new to you, and hopefully might convince you to join us over in the Beyond. And to do so, just visit our Patreon page at our website at monstersamonguspodcast.com, or join our $5 level on Patreon, or the $5 level on Apple subscriptions. Either way gets you the exact same content. Now please enjoy Season 13, Episode 10, the Beyond portion, which originally aired on May 18th of 2022, and Season 13, Episode 14, from June 16th of 22, already in progress. Now, over here Beyond, I have an array of wild entries I'm just itching to share, like this one from Carly in the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, my name's Carly. I called once before. I'm out in the Pacific Northwest, and I wanted to share this story. It's not really a monster per se, but it's weird. So, I grew up in a small town, kind of near the foothills of the Cascades, and I would kind of go out and visit different antique shops around the area. If you've ever been to farm country, you might notice that there's a lot of antique stores around run by local ladies and things like that. So I went to one of these antique stores right next to the town that I grew up in, and I was looking around and I found this cool poncho that looked like it was from Mexico and a gift for my mom. And right as I was about to leave, I saw this ouija board just sitting on this table, and I don't know why, I just felt like it needed to come home with me. And that's really weird because I was raised very religious, and so I didn't really ever even want to touch that kind of stuff, but I just felt like this ouija board needed to come with me. And so I asked the lady how much she wanted for it, and she said 25 cents. So I grabbed it and put it in my car and took it home. And when I got home, I grabbed the other stuff, but I felt like I shouldn't bring the board into the house. I got a weird feeling that I just shouldn't bring it in the house, and then I should just keep it in my car. And so I kept it in my car, and it stayed in my car for months and months, until finally I went to this festival that I go to every year. It's east of the mountains. It's in the desert. And we go out there and we camp and trade and play music, and it's a great time. Anyways, everybody brings different things up there to trade. And I brought my car that year, and so the Ouija board happened to come to the festival with me that year. And I felt like that's what its intention was all along. The festival lasts like 3 days, and it was the last day that we were going to be there. And so I had brought everything around that I was trying to trade, and I still had the Ouija board and a couple other odd things. We were walking around, and we had stopped by this bookstore, and they had this book that I really, really wanted. But the only thing the gentleman who owned the book was willing to trade it for was a jar of pickled garlic. And pickled garlic is a hot commodity around there. So I told him that I'd do my best to find a jar of it, which I didn't think I was going to be able to do because, again, it's a hot commodity. So we were walking around probably for another good hour and a half until finally we get to this one booth, and I see there's a jar of pickled garlic. So I walk up to the booth. There's nobody around, and so I kind of start calling, hey, whose booth is this? And this person with a top hat comes out of a tent, and they greet me and tell me that this is their booth, and I asked them if there's anything that I had that they'd be willing to trade for this jar of pickled garlic. And the person goes, well, that's my partner's jar of pickled garlic. She's saving it, and I don't think that she's willing to trade, so sorry. And I said, well, can I ask her maybe? And so the person left and went back in the tent, and this other person came out, the gal, and she came over, and I asked her if I had anything that she would possibly want to trade for her jar of pickled garlic. And she was kind of looking through my stuff, and then I remembered, I have that Ouija board, and so I pulled it out, and her eyes lit up to the point where, I noticed. And she's like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for one of these to come into my life. I'd absolutely be willing to, trade you for this jar of pickled garlic. Let me ask my partner. And so the person with the top hat comes back out of the tent, and they're kind of talking over there, and I'm trying not to be that nosy, but I, kind of noticed that their partner doesn't really want them to get the Ouija board, but they're pleading, please, I think I'm ready now, blah, blah, blah. And so eventually we make the trade. And the woman is so happy to have the board and all of this, and I get my jar of pickled garlic and go right back to the book stand and get the book that I wanted, and, we go home and exist for an entire another year until we go back to this festival. And so, we go back to the festival, and I'm walking around, and I recognize those people that I had traded that board to. And, everybody's kind of like family there, so I walked up to them and was like, hi, you guys, how you doing, and they were super friendly, hey, how's it going? And I was like, yeah, I remember you guys from last year. Do you remember? You traded that pickled garlic to me for that Ouija board. And all of a sudden, their faces just changed. They weren't happy. They went really straight-faced. And without saying anything, they turned around and they walked away. And I still have no idea what happened. But I find it really odd that board came home with me, because I just felt like I needed to, I feel like it used me to be like a vehicle for itself or something. Because where it ended up, I don't think that those people had a good time with whatever happened with that board. Anyways, thanks for letting me share. I know it's not really typically the kind of stuff that we share here, but I still got that spooky vibe. Thanks again.
Oh yeah, I'd say that qualifies. Thank you, Carly, for calling in. Now I'm dying to know where that board ended up. How do I get my hands on it? Coincidentally, if you have something creepy, cursed, or spooky that you'd like to donate, I'll happily give it a loving home. Just don't tell Sarah. One of these days, I'm going to open a museum or exhibit or something. So trust me when I say it'll be in good hands. So if that's you, just shoot me an email or something. And thanks again, Carly, for sharing that wild entry. Now up next, we venture to the land of enchantment. Brando, tell us what you saw.
Yes, hello. My name is Brando. I have a story that took place just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. A couple weeks ago from my call, I was driving on a fairly busy street in the nighttime around 11 or so, and I noticed following directly behind me what appeared to be a motorcycle with very, very bright yellow lights. Not the typical kind of headlights. It looked kind of similar to what police lights might look like, but in yellow instead of blue and red. It was following very close behind me, very blinding. It definitely caught my attention the entire time, and after driving for a little bit, trying to focus on the road, I looked in my mirror and the lights were gone. Was a little bit confused about that. Kept on going, then briefly saw the light behind me once again, for about 5 seconds or so that I was looking at them. Looked back at the road and then looked in my mirror, and once again they were gone. The same vehicle that had been behind me once they disappeared was right there, back behind me again. So I'm not sure if anybody's run into anything like this before. I'd definitely be interested in hearing if other people have had any kind of experiences with this, or if there have been any stories in the past about it. And it was definitely strange. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thanks, Brando. Oh, I know of at least one story that's similar to your experience. And it's a location that I visited once a year while I was in college. But apparently not at the right time. Now I know I've spoken about the Elmore Rider before, but for those that missed it, the following excerpt is from the book Weird Ohio. The legend of the Elmore Rider opens on March 21st with our hero returning from a successful tour of duty in the war. The moment he steps inside his house, he greets his parents, throws down his bags, and hops on his motorcycle, riding off to surprise his girlfriend who lives just on the other side of a nearby bridge. As our hero reaches his girlfriend's house, he notices movement in her bedroom. The young man prepares to knock and surprise her, and is horrified to see her in the arms of another man. Enraged, he climbs back on his bike and peels out of the driveway, spraying dirt and rocks from his rear tire. As our hero tears down the road toward the bridge, he realizes too late that he is driving too fast to negotiate the terrain. Tires squealing, the man slides off the road and into a barbed wire fence, decapitating him in the process. Today, it is said that if you go to the bridge on March 21st, the anniversary of our hero's death, his ghost will appear and reenact his fateful drive to the bridge. Just flash your headlights 3 times, and shortly after that, a ghostly white light will appear and move toward your car. Just before the light reaches the bridge, it'll disappear. It's fun stuff, even if he never showed up. So thank you, Brando, for reminding me of that legend.
The answer. Breaking news.
A floodwatch remains
ball-oriented, NFL-oriented family, if you will.
That is the truth.
This extended format certainly takes some getting used to. It feels as though this episode is hours long and I still have several stories to get through. So to inch us ever closer, please welcome Mike from California. to the program.
Hey Derek, this is Mike from San Fernando, California. This story also takes place in San Fernando, California. It's actually my grandmother's account, one of many stories that she has. She was into witchcraft her whole life, now is a devout Christian, but she has plenty of stories, things that she went through and things that she experienced and stuff, and she'll tell them to me. One story that's always stuck out to me that was really scary was this story that she had of when she came to America. She was an immigrant from Chiapas, and when she came to America, her parents couldn't afford to have the whole family go, so her and a neighboring family paid for both their daughters to get sent to America. So they traveled together, which that in itself is a crazy story, things that happened to them. But they get to America, they get to California, they're settling in, they were very poor, but the girls stuck together, getting little jobs here and there and stuff. And time passes, they were very close with their family, so they would always call back and, update them what was going on. But the girls were very close, and when they got here to Los Angeles, they were practicing white magic, as what she called it at the time. They were always doing rituals together, and we're kind of in this secret kind of scene of people that would practice that type of stuff in LA. So as their time here passed, the girl, I guess, ended up getting sick, my grandma says, with best friend, so it was a very hard time for her because the girl developed some rare form of cancer. And, my grandma was there through her days as she was passing away and cared for her. It was a very rough time for her, as she explained. The girl ends up passing away, and they lived together, so obviously my grandma had a bunch of her stuff still and, would cry and would try to contact her friend. Anyways, she ends up contacting her friend through certain rituals that they would do and, missed her so much and just wanted to know how she was doing, which she admitted was not a very smart idea. And the spirit that she contacted, which she thought was her friend, started talking to her, would only come to her at night when she was asleep, she said. And they would have conversations. She would get up in her bed, and she would sometimes see movement in the room, and she would ask her friend where she was, and this was always kind of scary for me because she said when she would ask her friend where she was and how she's doing, she would always reply with a short answer saying, "I'm lost and I'm cold." And that was really scary for me when she would tell me that story. So my grandma explains that little by little that the spirit started getting a little more angry, that she would ask my grandmother personal questions of what she was doing, what she was up to, if she was dating, how she was spending her time, like if the spirit was jealous or something. And this eventually turned into the spirit at night started pinching her, poking her, squeezing her, until finally my grandmother says that she started getting pulled off the bed and really annoying stuff started happening. She would be missing stuff, and so she reaches out to the girl's family and says, "Hey, you know what? I made a mistake. I tried to reach out to her, and these violent things are starting to happen to me." The family says, "Look, I don't know what you contacted, but she's passed. Whatever you're in contact with is now attached to you, and you got to get rid of it." So my grandmother, since I explained she was in that scene here in Los Angeles, she went to the Palero, which was like the main witch doctor, I guess, at the time, and he explained that what she needed to do was gather all the belongings of the girl, put it in a box, and take it to the cemetery of where the girl is laid to rest. But he explained that this spirit is going to leave as soon as you put the belongings on the grave. But he explained it's going to fight. It's going to fight to stay with you. So what you need to do is when you're walking to the cemetery, you're going to be bothered by this spirit. Sounds crazy, even saying it now. He explained that the spirit would try to fight to stay with her. And the only way she could get rid of the spirit is if, when she's walking to the cemetery, to not look back, not give any attention to the spirit, but do not look back. because it's going to try to lure you and it's going to try to get you to turn around and give it attention. If you do turn around, this spirit will attach itself to you and you'll be as good as dead. So my grandmother, when she would tell me this story, because I would ask her to tell it to me over, this part was very emotional for her and very scarring. She would tear up when she would explain this, because she said that as she was packing the things, that the spirit was asking her, what are you doing? And whispering in her ear, and sounded very sad to her. And so my grandma was crying the whole time and just didn't want to respond, because she didn't want to give it that attention, because she knew what the consequences would be. So she's packing the stuff away, and the spirit is constantly, telling her, why? Are you trying to get rid of me? What are you doing? Where are you taking my things? This and that. My grandma packs everything in the box and starts walking out the door. And she said the cemetery was a few blocks from her house. She said, mijo, the whole time I was walking to that cemetery, this spirit tried everything to get me to give it attention, to turn around. She said, as I first started down the street, it would tell me, Isabel, por favor, no me dejas, meaning, Isabel, please don't leave me. I miss you, I love you, stuff like that, you know what I mean? I miss you. And my grandma's just crying, not saying nothing to the spirit that she was talking to almost every night. She said as she neared the cemetery, the spirit started poking her, getting more aggressive, pulling her hair. She gets closer. My grandma's bawling in tears. The spirit slapping her from the back, yanking her hair, almost turning her around, you know what I mean? And my grandma almost turned around, because she said my friend's voice was in my ear. I had goosebumps because she was crying and in pain. She gets to the cemetery, puts the box down on top of the grave, gives a kiss to the belongings, and closes her eyes, and was still scared to open her eyes on the way back. She said she stumbled through the cemetery on her way back out of the cemetery because she didn't want to open her eyes in fear that she would see the spirit. And when she put the belongings down, the spirit stopped speaking to her. She opened up her eyes, and the spirit never returned. Anyways, I hope you could use this, Derek. I hope it's something you find interesting. I got a lot more stories, so I'll definitely call back. But this story did take place in San Fernando, California. Anybody from the 818 will know where I'm talking about. All right. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate the show. Love it, man. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mike. The valley. I spent a ton of time sweating my butt off up there. Certainly gets hot up that way. Now, what a wild string of events. Your grandmother's journey alone is an incredible tale. It's only amplified by the tragedy that she suffered and the torment that she endured. It's incredible stuff. So we thank you again, Mike, for preserving her tale. With a little luck, these episodes and your grandmother's story will live on long after we're all gone.
Rain and mountain snows will be tapering off by late in the day today.
We need to listen to his voice and do what he says.
Oh, he heard all that noise.
If you can't tell, I try to do as many stories as possible in this bonus time, so moving right along. This next call is so similar to other recent entries that it almost makes me think something strange might be going on. Please, welcome Tyler from Texas to the program.
Hey Derek, my name is Tyler. I currently live near Corpus Christi, Texas, and I just had a bit of an odd sighting up in the sky. This happened between 9:40 and 9:41 on 6/4/21. I was coming home, taking my sister home from a party, and we pulled into the driveway, and I got out of the car and looked up like I usually do. I'm always looking up to see what's going on up there, and I see what I think is a satellite at first, and I'll point it out to my sister, and then shortly thereafter I noticed another one, and then another one, and they were all in a perfect triangle shape, all moving uniformly. And about 10 seconds later, we're both looking at this triangle moving, and behind me, in the corner of my eye, I see another bright satellite coming behind, and what I realize is most likely the International Space Station, which I have confirmed that it was the space station. The weird thing is they were flying basically perpendicular to each other. So the space station is going southwest, and this other group of light is going, I guess, northeast. They're going 90 degrees to each other. So anyway, as this triangle comes near the space station visually, like as they approach each other, all three of the lights start to dim uniformly over the course of about 8 to 10 seconds, and they all just go out, and I don't see them again. And I continue to watch the space station. It flies way further into Earth's shadow before it goes out, which tells me that this group of lights, if it was reflecting sunlight, had to be lower in the atmosphere than the space station. So I'd say the group of lights was moving maybe a degree per second, not too fast across the sky, pretty slow. And the whole structure was a perfect triangle, and it was probably a solid 20-degree swath of the sky, pretty large. The thing is, it was not like a black triangle. It was just 3 points of light. I could see stars behind it, which I thought was kind of interesting. Anyway, if you're interested, I have drawn up a couple pictures, just some hand-drawn stuff. If you're interested, I can send those over. Thanks. I appreciate the podcast. Been a long-time listener, first-time caller, and keep it up. It's a great show. Thanks.
Thank you, Tyler. By all means, send those photos in. Monsters Among Us Podcast at gmail.com, and I'll post them up. Though Tyler's account seemed to include many more details than most past entries on this subject, it didn't seem to shed any light on this odd and disturbing mystery. And I think we can all agree that we're discussing another example of these flying deltas or black triangles. Now, as I mentioned previously, I'm spending some time in the Borrego Triangle this week, a known hotspot for these elusive craft. So maybe with a little luck, I'll have a sighting of my own. And don't worry, if I do, I'll have the cameras rolling. So thanks again, Tyler, for taking the time to share your experience with us. And just like that, we reached the end of this extended episode. And boy, did I save a strange one for last. So coming to us from the Golden State is Adrian. Welcome to the program, Adrian.
Hey, Derek. My name's Adrian. I'm from San Diego, California. Hey, bud. So, I'm 30 years old. About 20 years ago, roughly, give or take, I had stayed home. It was a Friday. Stayed home from school. I was going to go pick up my dad from the airport with my mom that day. Well, I mean, I'm a kid, so during that wait time that we were going to leave around 12, so I was up at 7 in the morning, and I started to play outside by myself. You know, I'm a kid, pretending I was at war. I had made my own swords and stuff, you know, pretending I was a knight as well, whatever. So I'm playing around in the backyard by myself, roughly around 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'm there, you know, swinging my sword around, and I made it out of a PVC pipe and 2x4 and some nails, right? I end up swinging this sword in the air and comes flying off the handle. And as I look up, I see this, what I recall is just seeing this gargoyle-type creature flying. It looks like a gargoyle. It looked like a man with wings, all black. I recall this memory so many times, you know, I feel like I've added on to it, but legitimately, I just remember just being all black, this humanoid figure flying. Not too high up in the air. I would say it's probably like 20 feet in the air. It was close. So I see this, and right away I run inside through the sliding glass door. I go to the kitchen. My mom's there washing dishes. And right away, I grab her and tell her to look out the window. I pull her out to the garage through the front, and this thing isn't there anymore. It, like, disappeared. This was a matter of seconds. Like, it was quick. Like, it was pretty trippy, and, you know, I don't know what it was. I told my mom, and she's like, I believe you, you know, and she didn't have to see it, but I was so, I guess, in shock more than anything, and curious, not scared. It was just something weird to see. Well, anyways, fast forward a couple years, probably like 2 years ago, my cousin texted me like around 12 in the morning, and I'm like, what's up, dude? And he's like, guess what I just saw? I'm like, what? I guess he was feeding his dogs, and he said that there was this gnome-type creature on his roof, so that he threw a rock at it. He thought it was like a bird, right? Like an owl or something. And he said once he hit it, this thing took off, but it like shape-shifted into this big gargoyle figure, right? And it flew away. And I'm like, dude, are you messing with me? Because I never told this story to him. I mean, he's not one of the to believe these type of things. He's real religious and stuff, but he doesn't believe in it, you know. And he tells me, yeah, dude, he's all like, I threw a rock and this thing just turned into this big human gargoyle type thing and flew off. And I'm like, what? And then I guess the way he described it, I mean, it's what I saw when I was a kid, like it was just big gargoyle thing. Like, I don't know, I'm still amazed. Just really wish I could find other stories. I mean, I've looked around, but I can't find anything on this. Anyways, Derek, thanks for what you do, man, and keep it up. Thanks, man.
Thank you, sir. Now, oddly enough, I worked on a film called I, Frankenstein about a decade ago, and the plot was near impossible to follow, so I won't even attempt it. But the bad guys turned into some sort of gargoyle. Again, like I said, it didn't make a lot of sense. But at any rate, outside of popular culture and films like I, Frankenstein, there aren't many references to gargoyles making the claim that they could be real flesh and blood creatures. Did you catch the key word in that sentence? Many? Many would suggest that there are some examples out there. And one of those experiences has grown in notoriety over the past decade or so, thanks to author and researcher Nick Redfern. And to expound on another experience not all that dissimilar to Adrian's, here is a clip from YouTube's Paranormal Junkie discussing the NASA gargoyles.
In 1986, a man named Frank Shaw returned home one night a little later than usual. His wife and daughter Desiree noticed right away that something was wrong. Something was just not right. Not only was he late, he was also acting very strange, like he was scared. So his wife and daughter wanted to know what was going on, and he told them something that they would never forget. While he was walking outside, heading towards his car after a long day at work, he saw a creature that looked like a gargoyle perched on top of one of the NASA buildings. At first, he didn't really understand what he was looking at. But as he was staring at this thing, he realized that this creature that looked like a gargoyle was real. It was alive, and it was staring directly at him. Now Frank just froze. He was terrified. He had never felt such a feeling of fear and dread in all his life. Then this creature flapped its wings and started to fly towards him. So Frank, scared out of his mind, ran to his car, and he drove away. Now his wife and daughter believed him, because why would he make something like this up? And also they could see the fear in his voice and on his face. But they told him not to tell anyone else about this, especially anyone at work, as they would think that it was probably crazy and he might just end up losing his job. So he agreed. But as the days went by, Frank just could not stop thinking about this encounter. He wanted answers. He needed to know what it was that he saw on that day. So he told one of his supervisors at NASA about what he saw. And Frank could not believe the response he got. His supervisors told him that he was not the only one. There were other NASA employees who had also seen this creature. There was even a secret file opened up about all these other sightings.
Now it gets more wild from there. Frank and his family were purportedly visited by the infamous Men in Black on several different occasions. And on those occasions, they threatened Frank and his family and demanded that he take his story to the grave. Now, surprisingly, Frank did just that. He died without ever sharing his experience. But luckily for us, his daughter, Desiree, looked the MIB right in the eye and went public with the story. She told Nick Redfern, and through him, the world found out. So I don't know what either Frank or Adrian saw, but for some strange reason, I believe them both. Some things are just too strange not to be real.
Not easy to get people's attention these days, but we're working.
Back next year. Two-time defending...
If it's been over a year.
And now for the second half of tonight's double feature. Season 13, Episode 14. Enjoy. Now put up your blast shields because from here on out, we're going beyond. And as I teased in the main show, tonight's bonus material will be another grab bag special. So buckle up, because I just pulled out Rob's call from parts unknown.
Hi Derek, this is Rob from the UK. I just wanted to give you my UFO experience that happened to me back during the late 80s. I think this was round about 1988, and the reason I think it was that year was that during that year I'd been away in Germany touring, playing US air bases on the continent, which is quite a normal thing, but back in those days, with my band. And when I'd come back from Germany, I found that my car had actually been stolen from outside my house. So I had no car for a while, so I was spending a lot of time in the evenings walking backwards and forwards between friends' houses late at night. On this particular occasion, I was coming back from a friend's, and it was a very starry night. There was no moon, but there was a beautiful, beautiful clear sky. And where we lived at the time, it was quite rural. We were on the edge of a town which is about 15 miles west of Cambridge, the famous university town. We lived kind of in a rural market town, which at that time, as I say, the part where I lived in was more like a village, so light pollution was pretty minimal. And I happened to be walking home just maybe 5 minutes from my house, and I happened to look up at the sky because I'm always stargazing, and I couldn't believe my eyes as I looked up above me. Passing overhead was only what I could describe really as something that looked like the black monolith from 2001. This thing had no engines, or no audible engines, no lights. In fact, no physical attributes at all. What it literally looked like was this shape was blotting out the stars as it sailed silently overhead. And I stood and watched it. It was about the same shape as a door, but it was much, much bigger. I would maybe estimate possibly the size of a tennis court, maybe slightly larger. It was hard to kind of guess the altitude because obviously this was nighttime. But I was just looking at this shape, and I could see this shape very, very clearly. It passed silently overhead into the distance, and I remember watching it disappear out of sight. And I also remember bitterly wishing that I had a car so that I could have got in my car and followed this thing to try and see where it was going. That's the only really sort of genuine UFO experience I've had. I love the podcast. Being a gigging musician, your podcast has been a companion to me on endless long journeys home from playing shows in the evenings. And now you're my companion when I'm travelling home from school, because I'm now a music teacher in the UK. Please keep up the good work. I listen avidly to your podcasts, and I always enjoy them very, very much. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rob. Clearly not calling from parts unknown. Obviously calling from the UK. Well, before I dive into this, I gotta say these grab bag episodes, they almost make me feel like I'm next to a campfire, spinning some yarns. So I hope you guys don't mind if I do this. That's better. Okay, now as for Rob's sighting. Another silent, black shape in the sky. I couldn't have planned that out any better if I wanted to. But again, this time, Rob doesn't claim that he saw a triangle. It was almost as if he couldn't make out the shape itself. So I have two quick theories that might explain that. One, everybody says that these craft, if they are military, may be inflatable. So I suppose that shape could be anything. Rectangle, square, triangle. Or these things could be just so big that from the ground it's difficult to discern what shape it even is. Either way, we appreciate it, Rob. Thank you for calling the story in, and I'm happy to accompany you anywhere you're driving. Now allow me to dive my hand back in this virtual hat and yank another name from the library. Daniel, from Texas. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going, Derek? My name's Daniel. I'm from East Texas, about 45 minutes from Shreveport, Bossier City, Louisiana, next biggest town, city. But yeah, I wanted to call you about an event I had, a story. So I used to work in the oil fields, and I would jump around all over Texas, Louisiana, New Mexico, So this one particular night, they sent me from East Texas down to Poteet, Texas, and I was driving, and I believe it was Highway 16. You know, I wasn't tired or nothing, but all of a sudden, I saw like a big white bird just shoot out of my front windshield, you know, and I was like, you know, just confused, like, what was that? You know, I was confused. It looked like a huge owl, so I really didn't pay much attention to it. So all of a sudden, as I'm looking around, I see it again, but this time it's flying right in front of me. And when I say that thing just creeped me out, I mean, I got scared. I had chills going down my body. When I saw it, it was a huge, huge bird. Beautiful white wings, like an owl, but it had the body of a woman. And the face was like a mixture between an owl and a woman. And I was just like confused. I was scared. I was just driving, but I wasn't even focused on the road anymore. I was so busy looking at this owl, and this owl was just like looking straight at me. So, you know, all of a sudden it just flew away. And the way it looked, it was like, imagine a woman in a tight bodysuit, I guess, where you could see her, not her body parts, but just like if she was naked, but with the suit on, but you could kind of see like where her ribs would go, and she had like fangs. It was weird. But she had white, beautiful, like, owl wings. And like I said, her face was in a mixture between a woman and an owl, because she had, like, a little beak for the woman's face. It was so confusing. So we had Thanksgiving a few months later, and I told the story at the Thanksgiving table with my family. And as I told that story, everybody was making fun of me, and they were just, you know, coming out with some conclusions and whatnot. But all of a sudden, I noticed that my brother-in-law and my sister, they just looked like confused, like if they were just thinking, like deep thinking. And he kept making eye contact with me, and I was like, what's wrong? And this is what freaked me out. He was like, did that thing have beautiful white owl wings? I'm like, yeah. Did it look like a naked woman with a tight bodysuit where you could still see like her ribs and her veins and stuff? I was like, yeah. I'm like, how do you know that? He was like, because I saw that thing. And I was just like, what? You know, everybody at the table just got shocked. Everybody just, you know, shushed and was just like, well, what happened? Tell us more. So he said that he saw it as well, but the thing is that he didn't see it flying. He saw it on the side of the road. He was driving, and he was also in the oil fields. He was driving with his crew, and he saw something out of the corner of his eye. And as he slowed down to look at it, he said that he saw the wings just flapping and flapping, like if a bird just got shot down from the sky or it got ran over. And he said that once he looked at it, you know, he rolled down the window and looked at it, and he saw it was like a woman figure. He got creeped out, rolled up the windows, and took off. And I asked him, so when did you see this? And he's like, this was about 7 years ago. What a coincidence, you know, that he saw it as well on the same highway, 16 down towards Poteet, Texas. He even asked his other coworkers if he saw it, and apparently 2 others saw it, and they were just creeped out. So I started trying to find some research on Poteet, you know, just trying to look for like owl lady, bird lady, just different kinds of things, but I couldn't find nothing. And so did my brother-in-law. He started looking for some closure, but we could never find something. So later on, I started talking about it to my mom. And my mom had told me that down in Mexico, where she's from, that there's been a lot of sightings of lechuzas, which is almost the same thing. You're looking at either white or black owl figures that usually women, witchcraft women, that they have the ability to turn into an owl or something like that. So I could never find anything, neither did my brother-in-law. So hopefully someone in your podcast that lives around the area can come up and say something. You know, to this day, I still don't know what it is. I mean, it freaked me out, you know, just the fact of how it looked. You know, it's just an amazing, creepy creature, you know. But, hey, Derek, I'm a big fan of your podcast. I've been listening for weeks now, and I heard a couple of your podcasts talking about the same thing about owls, figure-like ladies, and this and that, so I thought I'd give you a call. But, yeah, keep up the good work on your podcast. I'm a huge fan, and I hope you can use the story. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Daniel. There's another phenomenon we hear a lot about: odd owls. Now, typically, these sightings fall into one of 2 camps: aliens in the form of screened abduction memories, and lechuza, the Mexican owl witch. Now, as for the sighting itself, I can't help but think that maybe the barn owl might be a culprit here. It's white, is a very soft face, although I think many would struggle to say that a barn owl looks like a woman. I'll post a photo or two in the show notes or show description. Have a look and decide for yourself. And thanks, Daniel, for calling in. Now, our next lucky contestant comes to us anonymously, and again from parts unknown. Maybe for real this time.
Hi, Derek. Love you, love your show. I was listening to Season 3, Episode 12, and there was a story a lady told about seeing lights on the ceiling of a room during a religious ceremony. I think it was called the Noveno period. Anyway, I've seen something like that before, and I just wanted to call in and tell about it. It was at church when I was about 10 years old, which would have been about 1994, in Central Arkansas, a small Southern Baptist church. We had sold our church to another congregation, and we were building a different building. So we were having mixed services, sometimes staggered and sometimes together. And this other congregation was mostly African American. Our congregation was mostly white, but there was some overlap there. And so it was a really exciting time. We really had a lot of fun mixing with this group and having church services in a more exciting way. So one evening, what they called revival was going on, and it's where everyone just gets really into the spirit. So everyone was giving their speeches and testimonials, and there was laying of hands and speaking in tongues, and all of these things were singing, and you could see on the ceiling of the church these little diamond lights appearing, and it was almost like a crust of white lights. And it was just as your caller described it in Season 3, Episode 12. And I just wanted to say that I had seen that, period. So anyway, my father said it was a phenomenon called Shekinah glory, which I never have looked up. I don't even know how that would be spelled. But there it is. There's my story. Thanks for your show. You're great.
Thank you, caller. And I'll save everyone a bit of time. I went ahead and looked up Shekinah glory. And this, according to Christianity.com, is the definition. Shekinah glory is a visible manifestation of God on earth, whose presence is portrayed through a natural occurrence. The word Shekinah is a Hebrew name meaning dwelling, or one who dwells. Shekinah glory means he caused to dwell, referring to the divine presence of God. So there you go. No, I can't speak to the religious aspect of this, but I certainly can speak to the fact that Arkansas is a creepy place. They have the Crescent Hotel, the Fouke Monster, the Gordon Spooklight, several dozen purportedly haunted roads and bridges, the Ozark Howler, the White River Monster, and that's all just from memory. Like I said in the main show, Arkansas is a spooky place, and we certainly appreciate any entry we receive from there.
And I'm my brother's keeper.
He's gonna really be happy to hear that.
Sometimes it's gonna be cold, sometimes it's gonna be hot, sometimes it's gonna be wet, sometimes it's gonna be snowy.
Now, next to be showcased here on this Beyond episode is Jeff, out of the land of Lincoln.
Yeah, hey Derek, how you doing? Love the show. My name's Jeff. This story goes back to about 1996 or 7 up in a town called Naperville, Illinois. I was sitting on my bed doing homework with my dog we had at the time, Pooch, and I had a bunch of band pictures all over my wall, Pantera, Slayer, Nirvana, such, and one in particular poster of Kurt Cobain for my wall. And I don't know where my dog Pooch, he turns around and starts growling at that picture. He's looking directly into the eyes of him in that picture, and the growling starts to barking, and he stands up on the bed barking at him. I finally calm him down, and he jumps off the bed and runs out the room. Later on that night, we're out for a walk, and we get to the local pond in town, which you can see the water tower from the pond in the town. And I'm looking up at the sky in that very direction, and a huge green and purple comet or asteroid flies through the sky in a split second, just a puff, blink of an eye. You would have missed it if it was your peripherals, but it just appeared right in the direction of the sky I was looking at that night. So I don't know what to think much of it. Never seen a comet like that before in my life since then, and don't know if it has anything to do with Kurt Cobain or perhaps his spirit, because I am a musician and he was a big influence on me. So just wanted to leave that story to you and keep the show going. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So what do you think? Was this just a big coincidence? Or was the dog on edge because he somehow knew this aerial anomaly was about to pass by? Or perhaps, as Jeff seemed to suggest, it was somehow the spirit of Cobain. Well, thanks again, Jeff, for submitting that call. I can't help but feel it very at home in this episode. And that brings us to our final call of the evening. And full disclosure here, I cheated a bit on this one. I didn't want to leave you guys without some sort of little package at the end, so I made sure it was something I could build off of. So, coming to us from the state of North Dakota is our anonymous caller.
Hi Derek, I'm submitting a story from a time when I lived up in North Dakota. While it's a large state, the population is small enough that everyone knows each other within about 3 to 4 relations. So for privacy's sake, I'd like to keep everyone's names anonymous and will just refer to them by a letter. It's a longer story, but full of necessary information. Here we go. Hi Derek, I'd like to share a story from a time I was living in Robinson, North Dakota, which is about an hour and 20 minutes to the northeast of Bismarck in the middle of the state. I'm not originally from the state, but had moved up there in the summer of 2013 for work and had ended up living there for 3 years. My job required me to drive around the entire state for meetings, and as a result, I was on the road quite a bit at night, and I've seen some interesting things. At this point in my life, I was not necessarily a believer of the supernatural, but I wasn't opposed to the concept. The story I'm sharing now changed that. The following events occurred throughout the fall and winter of 2013 and 2014. If you have some sort of map application, I'd recommend using it during this story, as it'll help put components of the story into perspective. One evening in November, I had just left Robinson around 4:15 p.m. and was westbound on ND 36, headed to Bismarck for the midnight release of the new Xbox One console. Leaving town, the road curves to the north, then west again as it skirts the edge of a wetland. The roads in North Dakota are based on a 1 square mile grid system called sections, and while some roads are paved, the majority are gravel, and there are plenty of section lines that are just prairie trails, many of which dead end into seasonal wetlands. I had just passed a gravel road called 31st Avenue Southeast, which bisected 36, the road I was westbound on from the north, but didn't continue to the south because of one of the wetlands. Having traveled this road many times on my way to Bismarck, I knew that the next bisecting road wasn't for 2 miles because there was another wetland between it and myself that prevented a road from being constructed. So there was just a prairie trail that dead-ended into the wetland. Keeping that in mind, right after I passed 31st Avenue Southeast, a bright amber light caught my eye to the north of me just over the top of the prairie grasses, which can easily reach 4 or 5 feet tall. It was a very bright, ambient ball of light that didn't seem to have a directional beam. As I watched, it traveled south at great speed just over the top of the grasses, crossed the road in front of me, and then disappeared from view. From the time it appeared at the edge of my periphery to the time it disappeared from view was only about 2 to 3 seconds, and at the time it crossed the road in front of me was about a quarter mile away. From my perspective, the light appeared to be about 5 to 6 feet in diameter and didn't have any distinguishing characteristics. I continued driving, keeping an eye out for crossroads to try and rationalize what I had just seen, but didn't come across one until I reached 29th Avenue Southeast, 2 miles away. This was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this, and decided to keep the event to myself. A couple of uneventful months go by until the end of January, beginning of February. I was headed back from home from Jamestown late one night, and it had hit a ground blizzard somewhere around Medina. The wind was howling and whipping up all the snow on the ground, creating whiteout conditions, and visibility was about 10 feet in front of my truck. I continued making my way west along 94, driving slowly so as not to overdrive my visibility until I reached the small town of Tappan. Fearing that I might get rear-ended by another driver, I decided to take the back road home. The 39th Avenue Southeast is a gravel road that heads north from Tappan, jogs to the west about 1.5 miles, and then heads north again, coming out on ND 36 just over 5 miles to the east of Robinson, the town I lived in. The road is used frequently by local traffic, but I figured I wouldn't run into anyone on a night like this. I left Tappan and was driving slowly north, using the truck's GPS to help me navigate the road as I first hit the left and then right-hand turns which marked the halfway point. As I continued north, I had almost reached ND 36 when suddenly an almost blinding green light illuminated the dark, snowy night high in the sky to the west of my location. Keeping in mind that visibility was only about 10 feet, I struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. The light seemed to come from everywhere, perhaps because of the snow, but it was brightest at a point a couple 100 feet above the ground. As I continued to creep along the road, I reached the stop sign that signaled that I had reached ND 36. As the green light continued to shine brightly, I paused there for a moment, both to try and pick out where the source of light was coming from, as well as to try and recall if there had been some sort of a cell tower there. I turned left onto ND 36 and continued westbound in the direction of home. The light continued to shine from what appeared to be the same position and faded from view as I drove away. Thankfully, I was able to get home without further incident. The next day, the wind had died down and visibility had returned, so I decided to drive back to the intersection to see if there was a tower there. There was not. Much like my first experience, I decided to keep what I had seen the night before to myself. Now, these two incidences might not seem so extraordinary in their current context, but several months later I discovered a chilling component to this story. It was August, and I had just bought a house in the town of Steele, about 30 minutes to the south of Robinson on I-94. I was at a party with some friends when someone began talking about strange things they had seen in the North Dakota sky recently, and others started chiming in. Realizing that I wasn't the only one to have seen something, I decided to share my stories with the group. My friends told me that this area had been a hotspot some years ago and had even been featured on Earth Files. Someone started playing the episode of the podcast, and the host introduced a family from Tappan that had been the victim of some terrifying events. It was at this moment that I froze. E, in quotation marks, the son of the family involved, had been at the heart of their encounters from 2005 to 2006, which included sightings, livestock mutilation, and a physical attack on E himself on their family farm. E had moved into the apartment across the hall from me a week before my November 2013 experience. He was about my age, a great guy, intelligent, and a hard worker. We had become friends and often played video games together, talked politics, hunting, etc., but he had never once mentioned what had happened to him. Apparently, after the story broke, he had become the subject of ridicule in town and as a result didn't talk about what happened to him anymore. In my own research, UFO experiencers tend to have recurring encounters, almost as if they're magnets for these types of events. I can't help but wonder if what I saw was a result of that. Anyway, I hope you found my story interesting, and if it's featured, I've got plenty of other stories to tell. North Dakota might seem like a desolate place to the rest of the country, but there's plenty of interesting things going on in the night sky there.
Thank you, caller. That's a call you almost have to listen to more than once. And if you are one of those people, go back to about the 16-minute mark to catch the beginning of our caller's entry. There were tons of details given there. Enough details to dig up the episode of Earth Files that our caller mentioned. It's Earth Files Podcast number 5. And here's a sample of the madness included in that episode. Oh, and by the way, a slight warning. There's some light discussion of animal mutilation in the following clip, if you're someone that would rather skip it.
A cattle farm in Tappan, North Dakota, has experienced a series of highly strange events over the past year. First, there was a dead cow that coyotes would not touch. Then 16-year-old teenager Evan Breeze was checking cows ready to calve and encountered a triangle-shaped craft near a dugout water pond. The craft emitted blue beams of light and took off rapidly after Evan's cattle dog ran toward it, barking. Afterward, the family found an odd pattern cut into the dead cow's hide that had not been there before. Later, the father and other family members watched strange aerial lights move in patterns over the farm on 2 different occasions in July and August 2006. Then, on September 11th, around 1 a.m., Evan went to check the pig corral with his .22 and encountered non-human entities with sharp-bladed fingers dragging a dead sow. After Evan shot at one creature about 12 feet from him, Evan was grabbed from behind. He collapsed unconscious to the ground. When he woke up, the Adidas t-shirt he was wearing had 5 slices in it. There were 2 faint scratches on his chest that did not bleed. After that, a neighbor's buck sheep was found dead with 1 testicle cut neatly without blood from the scrotum sac. And finally, on December 5th, a buck boar on the Breeze farm disappeared. Where has all this happened? About 60 miles straight east of Bismarck, North Dakota. It's the small farming community of Tappan in Kidder County.
Of course, that was the voice of journalist, author, and paranormal investigator Linda Moulton Howe. A link to the full video can be found in the description. So, now that this location is on my radar, I'll be sure to look out for other North Dakota entries. And I can't help but wonder if nearby Minot Air Force Base might have something to do with this. That's a base with its own UFO history, but a history that we'll have to touch on at another time. And folks, that's going to do it for this evening. Monsters Among Us is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Copyright Red Crow Media. Additional support is provided by Sarah Carter Hayes and Delaney Bowers. All media used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. Follow us on social media, on YouTube. Give us a rate and review wherever that's possible. And don't forget to check us out every Saturday evening at 11 p.m. Eastern on the UNX Network. Just visit unxnetwork.com. And finally, tonight's score was provided by Iron Cthulhu Apocalypse, Code.ag Music, and Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Now be sure to catch our film Shadows in the Desert High Strangeness in the Brago Triangle, streaming for free on Tubi, and it can also be found on Amazon Prime. Alright folks, catch me back here on Thursday with a brand new installment. But until then, keep it spooky, and have yourselves a good night.